Season 5 of The Crown has been out for a few days, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. But today, I just want to break down what I think is the best scene in the season. The scene is set just before the divorce between Diana and Charles is made final. Diana sits alone in her apartment in Kensington Palace. She cuts a thin figure in a dimly lit room. We hear a car pull up outside. Diana walks to the window and peeks through the sheer curtains. She sees who it is and freezes. After the very public breakdown of the relationship, Diana and Charles battled each other to get public opinion on their side. This created a lot of resentment that really came out during the divorce negotiations. They eventually were able to put those hurt feelings aside to reach an understanding, and in what feels like almost a decade of fighting, they have reached some kind of peace agreement. Having had a long day of crying, Diana can't let Charles see her in this state. She rushes to fix her makeup. As footsteps approach, we can sense Diana's growing anxiety. She hesitates, and instead of going to the door, she peeks around the corner and she sees his silhouette in the hallway. She continues to watch him as though waiting for him to knock, but nothing happens. He almost sees her, but doesn't. He doesn't knock, he just stands there. Watching this moment play out reminds me of that image of a younger Diana when she was hiding behind some plants spying on Charles, who at that point was just her future husband, back when they first met. Diana isn't sure what to make of his being here. With an air of resignation, she crosses into the next room and pauses in front of the door. She exhales and swings the door open. He turns around in surprise when the door opens. We're almost waiting for one of them to say hello, but instead, Charles just acknowledges Diana with a faint, sheepish smile. This is totally different from the assertive and almost combative Charles we've seen all season. Charles has a habit of fiddling with his Prince of Wales ring, often when he's nervous, just like he's doing now. It's almost as though playing with his insignia ring makes him feel more grounded. Charles makes a remark about a picture on the wall. He hasn't seen it here before. In fact, he actually hasn't been here for a while. So we know from this setup that it's been some time since Diana and Charles have been in each other's company without anybody else around. Diana doesn't know what Charles wants and returns a sharp response, standing defensively in her doorway, as though she's guarding it. She asks Charles why he has come here. Charles searches for an answer but doesn't find one. After a pause, Diana asks if he's here to take away more of her furniture or if he's here to make some nasty last-minute change to the divorce settlement. I can't imagine being in that same situation where your ex, or future ex I should say, could just show up unannounced to your home and try and pull the rug out from under you, figuratively and literally. This moment shows how vulnerable Diana has been and how she lives in this constant fear of the royal family taking everything away from her. This is a very different Diana from the villain that Charles has made her out to be. Mirroring Diana's vulnerability, Charles glances around and says, "Honestly, I'm not quite sure why I'm here. All I know is I got in the car this morning and it just sort of drove itself here." Hearing this reminds me that Charles has these moments where he's a bit of a lost prince who struggled with finding his way. I'm not sure if Charles feels disoriented, because after all the years of trying to get out of this marriage with Diana, he's finally getting the divorce he had asked for, only to find out that his feelings, at this point, aren't what he expected them to be. Diana relaxes a little, realizing that this is one of the few times Charles hasn't come here with an agenda. She takes a breath, and her shoulders relax. She jokes with Charles that if she had known he was coming, she would have worn her revenge dress. If you recall, the revenge dress is that revealing black outfit she wore the day Charles came out publicly about his affair with Camilla, and it came during a pretty acrimonious time between them. I wasn't sure if joking about their public squabbles crossed the line, but Charles laughs, and seeing that they're about to laugh about it together, Diana softens into a smile. We see Diana's body language change as she lowers her guard and walks into her apartment, leaving her doorway open for Charles to enter. Charles follows after her, and then, kind of surprisingly, he tells her how beautiful she is. Okay, we haven't seen Charles look at Diana in this way for over a decade now, so it's no surprise when she thinks Charles is making fun of her. But when Charles tells her she looks natural, she immediately turns back into that Diana from when they first met. She does the whole side-eye head tilt and blushes. But at the same time, we see this whole new sense of confidence in her. She casually leans against the furniture, almost posing for him. It comes across as though Charles is seeing Diana as this beautiful woman that she's become for the first time. Before this, seeing Diana was just a constant reminder that he couldn't be with Camilla. So it's really great to see that with the divorce agreement in place, Charles is finally able to put aside his prejudice and see Diana as the beautiful and sensitive woman that she is. He realizes what even a small compliment can do to her. He reflects and has a moment of guilt. He tells her that he didn't show her enough kindness while they were together. Charles tells Diana divorce clearly suits her. I think he's trying to reassure himself that Diana will be fine after all this. But Diana rightly points out that it is Charles who is getting everything that he had wanted. Charles responds that no divorced man has ever gotten everything he wants. Diana just rolls her eyes and says, please. It isn't like Charles is going to be alone after this. He has the support of his family, and he's kept his relationship with Camilla going this whole time. On the other hand, Diana has no one. The man she was seeing had been scared off. She didn't exactly have the best relations with her family, and she had even lost her private secretary, who, for a while, was her closest confidant. She may be the most famous woman in the world, but her circle of trust has gotten smaller and smaller. Trying to get out of an awkward pause in the conversation, we get some comic relief as Charles puts some nuts from a dish into his mouth. Diana smiles as she watches him grimace at how stale they are. The nuts had apparently been sitting there for months. She offers to make him some lunch in the kitchen, but Charles ends up walking in the wrong direction, and she has to remind him of where it is. Remember, Charles used to live in this apartment, so it really seems that Charles has done a complete job of just blocking out all of his memories from living here. Diana doesn't seem to mind his forgetfulness. Charles offers that his time here wasn't all that bad, and that he was happy for 5 years, but Diana disagrees. She jokes, more like 1 year, tops, but then follows it up with, we're divorced now, so who cares? It's almost like Diana's ready to forgive him and move on. Diana leads him upstairs to where the kitchen actually is. We get a quick glimpse inside the fridge. It's mostly empty and half the food looks spoiled. This is a running theme. The neglect in the apartment seems to echo how Diana has been neglected by the royal family. The stale nuts from before were even flanked by photos of her soon-to-be former in-laws. Diana pulls together what fresh ingredients she has and ends up making an omelet as Charles supervises. They're jiving and having fun, and for the first time in a long while, they're actually behaving like a happily married couple. And it feels like maybe this could actually have worked out. She scrambles the omelet when it starts to fall apart on her, and Charles just laughs at how silly it all is. Pro tip, never use metal utensils in a nonstick pan. I know it was the 90s, but is that stupid? No, cool. They sit at the kitchen table together. Charles seems so happy. Between vigorous bites, he comments, why doesn't one eat scrambled eggs all the time? This is kind of miraculous, because Charles is known for requesting a poached egg with every meal. Diana laughs. Charles wonders why they didn't eat in the kitchen more often, something that Diana actually used to do all the time. Alone. We're getting more reminders of just how things could have turned out very differently if Charles had just entered this marriage with an open mind. Okay, now that Charles has been fed, I think he finally figured out why he came to see Diana. He wants to have a review of their marriage, to just lay it out on the table. Diana wistfully calls it an autopsy, but she goes along with it. And then this really wonderful thing happens. They admit to one another their faults and actually apologize, something normally impossible for them to do. Charles admits he didn't know what Diana needed, and he's sorry for that, and Diana even accepts how difficult she was. She even acknowledges her need for attention and how much of that became an attack on him. This felt like a moment of catharsis for them, as well as for us, the audience. After seeing them tear each other apart for a season and a half, we're finally able to see them come together and care about each other. Charles tells Diana, I'm sorry too, for all of it. Diana then takes a playful jab at Charles, and he takes it the wrong way. He drops his head and pulls that whole sad Charles face that we tend to see when he gets his feelings hurt. Diana sees she has hurt him, and right away, she actually reaches out and apologizes. He looks up and smiles. And it's like, why couldn't they have just done this in the past? Why couldn't they have just apologized their whole way through the 80s when they were offending each other all the time? Could they have made this work? I think at this point, the kindness that Diana is showing towards Charles starts to really feed into his feelings of guilt, and it becomes a little overwhelming for him. In this strange moment, he admits to Diana that there was love there, something I think he had been in denial of. They both even agree that, just like everybody thought, they were the perfect match, but just not the perfect love, Diana points out. From the beginning of the relationship, Diana and Charles were under a lot of pressure to live out this fairy tale romance for the public. But now that their fairy tale is broken down so publicly, it feels like they're now able to approach each other without expectation. And we're left for a moment thinking, maybe this relationship could have worked if it was just given a bit more space. Diana brings us back to reality when she reminds Charles this could have never worked because of someone else. Throughout the series, Diana has rarely referred to Camilla by her name. I think she avoided saying it because doing so would make his betrayal seem so much more real and painful. Charles asks Diana, "Could you do me a favor? Could you say her name?" This is the first time they've spoken of Camilla in this way, so open and calmly. If Diana can say Camilla's name, she can give Charles something he always wanted for Camilla: recognition. And by doing this, Diana might be able to finally accept what Camilla means to Charles and perhaps find some closure for herself. She takes one of the longest pauses in the scene as she looks Charles in the eye and softly says, "Camilla." Charles is overwhelmed with feelings, and it's almost like he's about to cry. I couldn't believe it. This is something she never could have done before. Her voice quivering, Diana tells Charles, "I never stood a chance." This recognition is almost liberating for her. Nothing she could have done would have made any difference in the outcome of any of this. Charles shifts uncomfortably away from her. He knows what she's saying is true. Reflecting on what Camilla had to go through as well because of him, and almost as though he's speaking to himself, he mutters, "Neither did Camilla." Diana thought of herself as the princess who never stood a chance to get her prince's love. But at the same time, Camilla was never going to have the same opportunity that Diana had to just be with Charles and be accepted by the public. All the shouting and fighting never really mattered. Diana and Charles were both victims of a horrible system. Charles was denied the person he loves, and Diana fell in love with someone who would never love her the same way she loved him. With all this aside, I think Charles was genuinely hurt and hadn't gotten over what Diana said about him in her Panorama interview. During this interview, she openly suggests that Charles is unfit to be king. This is a huge issue for Charles. As far as he's concerned, Diana knows how influential she was, and she knew the impact this would have. So while they're putting all their cards on the table, Charles brings up the interview. It feels that all he's looking for is an apology, but instead, Diana just attempts to explain herself. All Charles hears are more attacks on his suitability for the throne. No matter how Diana tries to spin it, Charles cannot overlook Diana's attempt to delegitimize him. It's unfortunate that after coming together like that, after they apologize to one another and acknowledged the hurt they have caused one another, this interview is something they just can't get past. The two of them have just justified their feelings in different ways. Diana lists off the problems with being the heir to the throne. The misery, the endless waiting, not being able to marry the person you love. She says, "What caring mother would wish that on her son?" This pisses Charles off, because to him, it was Diana's actions that caused his misery. His royal responsibilities were never the problem. When Diana asks Charles why he married her, Charles delivers the knockout blow. "Because I had no choice." Diana says, "There it is." this isn't the first time that Charles has told Diana that he married her because it was arranged by his parents. But saying it here, while Diana is showing him compassion, is all the more devastating. And your heart just really goes out to Diana. So now they're back to hacking chunks out of each other. And it's really sad to see this happen again. It's as though in this one scene, their entire relationship is being replayed from beginning to end. Starting with Diana looking curiously at Charles in the hallway, to them flirting playfully in the living room, to them cooking together as a happy couple in the kitchen, and finally, here, just falling apart. There's a moment as both of them have tears in their eyes and all the pain has returned. Charles stares blankly into space, while Diana sighs deeply. As a final indignity, Diana tells Charles that her popularity has transferred to William, and now the people would rather see their son as king rather than him. Ouch. Charles does now what he's frequently done in this marriage. He takes one last swipe at Diana. He tells her, "I came here today racked by guilt and uncertainty, and sad for what the country had lost, and sorry for my part in it. But I leave here liberated, and more certain than ever that only with you out of my life and out of this family can anyone find the happiness and stability that's eluded us for 16 years. He then walks out on her and slams the door. Diana sobs quietly. Diana has always said she grew up lonely. Her parents' divorce really affected her as a child, and all she ever wanted was a happy, loving family. She even says to Charles in the scene, she didn't give birth to an heir. She gave birth to a son they could have a family with. Having just relived the arc of her relationship with Charles all over again, she is back to where she started before the scene even began. Heartbroken and alone. It's well documented that in real life, the day Diana and Charles' divorce happened, they sat down on the couch together and cried. And we'll never know what they actually talked about. In this scene, we see the fairy tale that could have happened, but ultimately why it was doomed from the beginning. So what do you think? Let me know if you have any other scenes that you want me to break down for you in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this.